The Latter-day Saint temple experience may seem abstract and hard to grasp, but author and professor Anthony Sweat offers a different way in, making the temple endowment more vivid and tangible. In his book, The Holy Invitation, Professor Sweat tells a fictional story that frames the temple endowment as a sacred rehearsal, an intentional preparation for the very real day when we will stand before God Himself. You are listening to chapters from Out of the Best Books, where curious and committed disciples of Jesus Christ come to find fresh insight and deeper conversations about the gospel. Each week, we open a chapter from the Deseret Book Library to dive into. I'm your host, Cole Wissinger. Here is part 2 of The Holy Invitation, titled A Metaphor, the Commoner and the King.
In the time of kings, there was a commoner named Asher. A man of great talent, Asher worked as a stonemason in his village, which lay just south of the king's royal city. From the window of his small cottage, Asher could see in the distance the towers of the royal castle, a palace that his forefathers had helped build generations ago. Not to be outdone by his ancestry, Asher also worked for the king, carving intricate stone reliefs that adorned the royal courtyard and its stately buildings. Although he lived within sight of the castle and sometimes traveled to the king's outer courtyard for his work, being a commoner, Asher had never set foot inside the palace itself. Only those who were of the king's family, commissioned officers, or special guests were invited to enter the royal sanctuary, and Asher, a mere stonemason, was none of these. One late afternoon, however, there came a clomping of horse hooves to Asher's workshop, and a rider dismounted. "Are you Asher the stonemason, son of Matthias?" the man asked. His back to the doorway and head buried in concentration, Asher responded, "I am he. How might I please you, sir?" The rider announced, "I am an emissary from the king's court, come with a request of you." Registering the words, Asher turned and saw a vested officer from the kingdom, standing in the doorway in full uniformed regalia, the royal crest embroidered on his horse's riding blanket. Quickly bowing to the ground, Asher profusely apologized for his informality. "Please, do not despair," the royal officer replied. "I have come to deliver a special invitation for you. Each year, by his grace, the king selects a few chosen, faithful women and men from his kingdom to come to the castle and meet with him in his royal highness's highest court." Extending his hand, the officer presented a rolled invitation, sealed with the king's crest in red, shining wax. Asher took the invitation, and breaking the seal, opened it to read, "Asher, son of Matthias, as a reward for your years of devoted service to the crown and for your faithfulness to my commands, I have chosen and found you worthy to be a recipient of my highest award in the kingdom, becoming a member of the royal order. To bestow my blessings upon you, you are hereby invited to meet me in my highest court on Saturday next. Your king." Asher could not comprehend how he had been selected for such an honor. Perceiving Asher's thoughts, the royal officer spoke to him. "Your king is a good man, the best of men. He knows of you and your faithfulness. Your years of service have not gone unnoticed by him or by his chief servants." Asher thanked the officer, and still clothed in his dust-laden frock, mounted his horse to quickly ride home and tell his family the wondrous news. The appointed day to meet with the king soon arrived. Asher had done his best to prepare for the occasion, but was unsure what to expect. He put on his best shirt and coat, yet he still felt somewhat underdressed. For that matter, he was not sure he felt completely worthy of the honor of meeting the king and becoming part of the royal order. Asher wondered whether he was really ready for such a turning point in his life. For once you are initiated by the king to be a member of the royal order, the whole kingdom knows of it. Even the king's enemies know of it. Members of the order are given a beautiful ring to wear that symbolizes their initiation into the order, a ring to remind wearers of their position of sworn lifetime loyalty to the kingdom. In nervous anticipation, Asher rode to the castle gates with his family and bid them goodbye, promising a full report when he returned. As he approached the gates, he saw the king's guard standing ready to receive him. Upon inspection of Asher's identification papers, including the most important document of all, the royal invitation, one of the guards opened the large, beautiful gates and said, "Honorable Asher, we welcome you to the king's palace. These servants will escort you and prepare you to meet the king." Asher looked past the guards to see what seemed to be a small army of royal courtiers. As he stepped through the gates into the courtyard, one of them offered his hand. "Asher, we will be your attendants to prepare you for the king's presence. Before you can come meet the king, you must be properly prepared. Come, let us have you bathed." Although Asher should have anticipated this customary cleansing, as he knew that all who met the king must be clean in every regard, he was somewhat surprised. "I am a clean man," Asher retorted. "Yes, you seem well groomed," the servant answered, "but the king's highest court requires the strictest standard of cleanliness and purity." Taking Asher's right hand and examining the dirt under his fingernails, the servant said, "Come, let us make you fully prepared." Asher was first led to a room where the king's servants trimmed his beard, cut his hair, and clipped his nails. Then he was shown to a room with a warm bath already drawn. "Please, sir," a servant implored, "we ask that you bathe yourself completely, from head to toe. It is both a blessing and a requirement to be so thoroughly purified before the king." Asher stepped into the room and bathed as instructed. This was the first time Asher had felt so thoroughly cleansed in as long as he could remember, and it felt very, very good. Wrapped in the bathing robe that had been provided for him, Asher reached toward his pile of clothes to dress himself. "No, dear sir," the servant explained, "you will not wear your own clothes. To be brought into the king's court, you must be dressed in the appropriate clothing, vestments fit for a presence in his royal court." Asher looked past his commoner's clothing and saw a neatly folded pile of colorful robes, articles that were different than he was accustomed to wearing, even on special occasions in his day-to-day village life. No trousers and boots, but instead silk stockings, woven breeches, soft velvet shoes, a beautiful undershirt, a colorful tunic, a splendorous robe, and a finely woven cap. "Please adorn yourself with these," the attendant instructed, "for these are what all visitors wear when they have audience with royalty." Now cleansed and appropriately clothed, Asher was unsure where to go next. He stepped forward and asked which hallway led to the king's court. "Oh, it's not yet time to be taken to meet the king," said the servant. "We must first teach you how to appropriately approach the king, the protocols, the reverences and bows. You don't simply walk up and greet a king. He invites you to meet him. Come, let us take you to Simon, and he will instruct you." Asher was led down a large sunlit hallway adorned with wondrous fine art and furniture. After ascending some stairs, he passed through a beautiful doorway that opened into a large, ornately decorated room. This time, however, Asher wasn't alone. He was joined by other common men and women from the kingdom who had also been chosen to meet the king and receive the honor of initiation into the royal order. Asher didn't recognize any of them. They were women and men from other villages, but in their eyes he could see their zeal for king and country, and could imagine the service they had rendered and yet would render for the sovereign they loved. Asher let his eyes meet with another's, and they nodded toward each other in mutual understanding. Just then Simon entered the room. The highest of the king's officers, Simon was well known throughout the countryside. It was he who most often communicated the king's declarations to the people, and he was the only person authorized to speak in the king's behalf. "Welcome to His Royal Highness's castle, most esteemed men and women of the kingdom. I am Simon, the king's chief servant, and as the presiding officer, it is my duty to prepare you to enter his royal presence and have audience with his majesty." Simon proceeded to teach the initiates how to approach their king and properly come into his presence. They were small but significant items of instruction, such as the proper depths of bows, appropriate and inappropriate communications, how to rightly ask the king a question and receive an answer, approved and disapproved actions, such as never turning your back toward the king, and required statements to show faithfulness and loyalty. "These are not arbitrary guidelines," Simon informed, "although you may not initially comprehend their significance. In its own way, each of these acts demonstrates reverence, obedience, and commitment to the king." The group listened intently and somewhat anxiously to absorb and remember all of Simon's instructions. After the group members practiced the directives to ensure they were prepared, Simon and the king's servants lined up the small group and began to take individuals into the king's high court, one by one. About 10 places in line back, Asher waited nervously and rehearsed the instructions in his mind. One at a time, the men and women entered the royal chamber. Asher reflected on his life up until this moment, and he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and humility at the honor that he, a common stonemason, should be invited to meet the king and be initiated into his highest order. His mind suddenly snapped back to the present as the servant said, "Asher, you are called. It is your turn." Stepping forward, Asher walked to Simon, who was positioned outside a grand set of double doors that led into the king's high court. Sensing Asher's nervousness, Simon comforted him with a few words. "You, Asher, are both worthy and prepared for this honor. Do not despair. The king will receive you most warmly." With that, Simon knocked gently on the king's door and announced with a loud, authoritative voice, "I present to your majesty Asher, the son of Matthias." The large double doors parted, and Asher stepped forward toward the presence of his king. Despite all his preparation, when Asher passed through the royal chamber's doors, he was caught unawares. The king's highest court was the most breathtaking room in which Asher had ever set foot. He had never seen such a combination of beauty and artistry. Asher surveyed the room, and on the opposite end he beheld the throne of the king, and seated upon it the king himself. Recalling his newly acquired protocols, Asher began his observances, bowing and reverencing, step by step as instructed, as he approached the king. After proclaiming his oath of loyalty, Asher made his final bow and held out his hand according to Simon's instructions. Asher waited, somewhat unsettled, not only because he did not know what to expect next, but also because he was still a few feet away from the king. As he waited, still bowed before the king, he heard movement, followed by footsteps. He realized that the king was coming to him. Asher kept his head low, and his arms stretched out as instructed. Suddenly, he saw the feet of the king stop directly in front of him. "Asher," the king said, upon taking his extended hand, "rise and look upon me." Asher arose and slowly lifted his head until he met the gaze of the king. His majesty was the most wondrous person Asher had ever seen. This was not due to his royal dress or his physical form and features. Indeed, the king was a man like himself, and nothing about the king's beauty called attention. The wonder was that the king exuded an almost tangible power in his persona, the air of unequivocal authority that emanates strength of character coupled with meekness. Asher was overwhelmed. Still holding Asher's hand, the king produced a wrapped item. He then let go of Asher's hand and unwrapped the item, revealing a beautiful ring. The king then spoke, "For your devoted faith and service, I gift you this ring and initiate you into the royal order, making you, Asher, a commissioned servant of the king, one with authority to teach others of my kingdom, character, and ways." With this pronouncement, the king slid the ring onto Asher's right index finger. The ring, made of gold and ornately decorated, contained 3 precious stones, a clear opal, a blue sapphire, and a red ruby. His Majesty explained, "This ring is a sign to others of your initiation and authority, and a reminder to you of your duties as a member of the order." The king guided Asher toward his throne and directed him to sit in a chair to the right of his Majesty's seat. For the remainder of their brief time together, the king instructed Asher about his kingdom, its inception, rise, fall, and providential redemption. He told Asher things that the king, his servants, and all subjects must do to maintain their freedom and prosperity. Asher learned ideas familiar to him, along with concepts he had never before known, understood, or considered. As their time drew to a close, the king explained to Asher, "This is not a one-time audience. You have begun to learn the purposes and ways of my kingdom so that you may teach others as one of my authorized emissaries. But there is much you still don't understand. Come again. I will instruct you anew and teach you face to face, that you may have a perfect knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom. To represent me accurately, you must know me intimately." Then, leaning in close to Asher, his Majesty said, "You are beloved to me, Asher, as are all my subjects. But your dedicated loyalty has set you apart. You are not a commoner. Through my grace, I now make you an heir." Sensing Asher's astonishment and confusion, His Highness motioned to Asher to turn around and look at the seat back of the chair he had been sitting in beside the king. There, previously unnoticed, was an inscription carved into the top of the chair: Asher, heir, through the blessings of the royal order of the king. Your Majesty, Asher meekly responded, I am honored and humbled at your continued benevolence and grace, but... Asher hesitated before asking the question. An heir of what? The king took Asher to a nearby window and gestured his hand with a sweep over the vast lands and towns of the kingdom, as far as the eye could see. And in his final words to Asher, the king answered simply, an heir of all that is mine.
That was part 2 of Anthony Sweat's The Holy Invitation, and it's available at Deseret Book. While you're there, you can also check out The Holy Covenants by Anthony Sweat, and Anthony and Cindy Sweat are co-authoring a 3rd companion book that will be out later this month titled The Holy Sealing. We look forward to hearing a chapter of that coming up. Thank you for listening today, and we'll be back next time with another chapter pulled, as always, from out of the best books.